We'll get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Veg Networking Canada. It's important to honor, acknowledge, and respect that many of us are located on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of many Indigenous peoples of Canada. Veg Networking Canada is a community where plant-based vegan people and companies connect and collaborate. Today, we have a very special guest who is an animal advocate who has worked on initiatives with Faunalytics, Humane Canada, Animal Justice Academy, and Reimagine Agriculture. She is a board president of a Toronto cat rescue organization, I think in Toronto, correct me if I'm wrong, we'll get into that, and a champion for a more sustainable and kinder food system. Veg Networking Canada is pleased to introduce the operations manager at New School Foods. Welcome, Jennifer St. Onge. Welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Well, we're happy to have you here. So thank you so much for spending some of your time with us. A valuable asset none of us can get back. So we're going to use this time to learn a little bit more about you personally, as well as New School Foods. So starting with you, can you share more with us who are here today and those who will be listening afterwards about your own personal plant-based vegan origin story?
Absolutely. So I'm really inspired when I hear about people who've been vegan for 10, 20 years. My story is not quite that long, but it's better than, you got to start somewhere. So, I mean, I grew up in Saskatchewan with a lot of extended family that were farmers, and, you know, we had a lot of meat around us. It was sort of, that was the norm. I don't think I even knew a vegetarian until I was in my 20s. But it was actually moving to Vancouver that really started to open my eyes up a little bit more, started to learn about the sort of the farming industry. I will say, unfortunately, I fell for a bit of the humane washing. I wanted to believe that actually animals could be treated well on farms. And so it took me a little longer to kind of open my eyes truly to some of the true suffering that animals experience around the world in so many ways. So it was actually kind of a few years ago. I was on maternity leave, taking a break from my career in health research. And I actually discovered the effective altruism movement. So a group of people and organizations really dedicated towards trying to do the most impact they can with their time, with their money. And it really resonated with me. I always wanted to do something that really had a lot of impact in the world. And it was really through that I started to think about, you know, could I actually have an impact on animals through my career, as well as in a personal choice? And, you know, farmed animal advocacy is one of the most important problems in the world. It's, when you look at the number of animals that are affected by it, the amount of suffering, it really is an extremely important problem. And so I realized, oh, there's this whole community of people and organizations that I had never considered before. So I really just dove in. I decided this is my mission in life. I always was jealous of people who, you know, did something that they loved, and I thought, oh, maybe I can't find that. And turns out I could find that. It just took me a while to get there. So I did a lot of volunteering, worked with different organizations. Dustin mentioned some of them at the beginning. Really tried to figure out, you know, where can I find a good match for my interests, what I'm good at, and how I can make the most difference for animals. And then personally, that was sort of when I went kind of fully vegetarian. Took me a little bit longer to go the whole way. I had some health issues, and it's actually frustrating. It'd be interesting your perspective, Hannah, on. It's like doctors and people were telling me I couldn't go fully plant-based, that was actually going to be a problem for me. And I listened to them too long. And then I finally just said, I'm going to go for it, and let's just see what happens. And turns out it went great. So I'm glad I didn't listen to them. I know everyone's trying to do their best to help people, but in my case, I should have went earlier. So yeah, really, it's actually been a really easy transition. It's only a problem if you're trying to travel. That's been a bit of an interesting, as I travel more with COVID, didn't have an issue. Staying home most of the time, it was easy. So now I just have to be a little more creative when I'm traveling about how to plan ahead and look for stuff. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at now. And now I want to find more community because we don't have a huge community, a vegan community here. So
what an inspiring start to the conversation in terms of having that thought that, oh, maybe I won't be able to find something that is mission, vision, value aligned, and being able to go for that and find that. I think that's going to be really impactful for a lot of people to hear as well who might be in a similar position. So switching gears from personal and telling us more about you professionally, how did you get involved in the alternative protein industry?
Yeah, so I was kind of taking some time to explore sort of all different sort of careers and roles sort of within the farm animal advocacy movement, because I wasn't really sure what would be, either the most effective or the best fit. And so I was thinking research at first. I really was interested in some of the big campaigns, especially in the States. I was looking at policy. I thought that was a really great, interesting area. So I kind of did a bunch of volunteering just to test out, is this something a good fit? What's going to work here? And then I ended up talking to who's my now colleague, Jeffrey, about a training program that was called through the University of Cambridge called the Alternative Proteins Training Fundamentals Training Program. And I thought, why not? Let's take a look at it. And I think that's when I really got excited about alternative proteins as kind of a theory of change. So there's different theories about how we can basically become a vegan world. And there's lots of debate about it. And I think that's important. And I think it's really good to have sort of a pluralistic approach to the movement of different people working on different things. I don't think one path is going to get us there. But in this case, it felt like, for me, the most tractable way to work on the problem at the time. I thought it was something that I could kind of use some of my psychology background and some of my research skills to really tackle that. So yeah, I think it was sort of like, okay, this might be a good avenue for me. But then when I started looking for positions, I saw, oh, they're looking for a lot of scientists, engineers, founders. And I was like, oh, I don't know if there's a place for me. So I wasn't really sure how it was going to kind of work out. But as they say, networking is kind of the way to find opportunities. And that was true for me as well. So I managed to kind of meet with the founder and found out about New School Foods. And especially in Canada, it's a growing movement. We do have lots of alternative protein companies, but still relatively small. And so it was great that I really wanted to stay in Canada if I could. And so it was like, oh, there's a company in Canada. And then when I found out about the mission, so New School Foods is really focused on making real, true whole cut meat alternatives. So a whole steak, a whole filet fish, whole chicken breast. It's one of the biggest challenges with alternative protein options is being able to solve that scientifically, that challenge of getting a product that actually mimics those tougher fibrous meats, something that you can't just drown in a sauce, something that people are going to be really looking to mimic the real product. And yeah, we've got a really new, exciting proprietary technology that's different than what's out there right now. And so it's got lots of potential for being able to really be a game changer. And what's really great about it for me from a mission perspective is as many of these companies are, the founder, Chris Bryson, he is very mission aligned. He's vegan himself. He's very passionate about disrupting the meat industry and really making that change to a more sustainable food system. And I thought, how awesome would it be to work for somebody who has that drive and passion? And most of the people working there do. But having that leadership, I think, is really great and inspiring to work with. So yeah, I basically talked, and Chris was looking for somebody to really be focusing at first on some of our government relationships. So in Canada, thankfully, the government is really supportive of this new industry and actually putting a lot of money into it. Protein Industries Canada is driving a lot of work. We're funded by them, which is wonderful. And so this was actually just a really great match for me because I love doing things like grant writing. And I thought, wow, I can combine the stuff I like to do in the industry I want to work in. So for me, it was just like a no-brainer. I was feeling very thankful to just sort of stumble upon this opportunity. So my role is called operations manager, which, some people know is kind of a catch-all term for a lot of different things. So I'm more focusing on sort of the business side of it, less on the sort of the facility and that kind of work, but I am supporting that too. In a startup, you got to do a little of everything, which is also really fun. I went from working in government, which is sort of a much different pace and flow to things, to every day is new and exciting and different, but it's all doing things that are promoting this movement. So for me, it's I get to learn stuff even when it's stressful. It's okay, but it's all doing things that are going to make a difference for animals. So it's just, I'm actually now able to say that I love my job every day. So really thankful to be there and have found that.
Incredible. And there's a funny saying, keep calm and let the ops manager handle it. So yeah, the wearing a lot of different hats. So
Yeah.
next question is surrounding trends, transformations in your industry. And you already touched on it, right? The producing whole cut without the cut, if you know what we mean, which is a trend in and of itself. So why don't you touch on that and tell us a little bit more about trends in the alternative protein space?
Yeah, it's an exciting time. There's lots of companies, it's growing, there's lots more investment in the space. I do think, if you've been monitoring some of the news, there's a little bit of counter to that too. Some of the companies are, not doing as well, sales are dropping. But to temper that, there's a few companies that are having a bit more of a challenge, but there's others that are doing quite well. So like Impossible Foods and Perfect Day, where you do see they're not having any issues, they're getting lots of growth. And so I think sometimes, I mean, I'm less familiar about sort of the general, food industry, but some of these, when you're looking at like a really new industry like this, you're not going to have this like straight shot to mass adoption. It's going to be much more bumps in the road and those adoption curves. I read a great article the other day sort of about how, we probably just haven't hit the tipping point yet. So, in the early stage, as we get more people involved, there's going to be those bumps in the road. And then at some point it's going to tip, and then it's going to get that sort of widespread adoption. So that is likely what's happening. And people are just getting maybe a little bit scared from some of the bumps. And obviously we're dealing with the after effect of COVID and the recession and all these things at the same time. And it's not going to be like specific to the alt protein. So I don't think there's any reason to get pessimistic about it. I think, you look, was it yesterday where, the FDA now approved is going forward with cultivated meat, for example. It's still got another big hump to go, but there's progress happening. And I mean, in Canada, we're seeing lots of investment. Protein Industries Canada is going to get renewed, and there's going to be lots more money in the space. So I think Canada is a great place to be for this. And we just came back from Singapore, which is a huge hub for this industry, and really exciting to see all the investment in that country too, and all the companies. So I mean, sometimes we can get in our little bubble, or maybe it feels it's a lot bigger than what's really happening in the real world. And I'm really conscious of trying to always, get outside of that bubble and learn from other industries and stay tabs on like what other people are feeling, and especially people who are sort of more, not in favor of this industry maybe as much, because there's always things to be conscious of and learning there. So I'm optimistic, and I think that we're going to see a lot more change in the near future. Lots of hybrid products. There's really lots of exciting stuff to come, I think.
Excellent, excellent. Now, earlier on, you mentioned the proprietary process, which is always really exciting when there's something proprietary about a business. So with that being said, maybe you'll touch a little bit more on that or other factors as well. But the question is, what are some of the goals at New School Foods?
Yeah, absolutely. So like I said, the mission is really to create a more sustainable food system. And the way that we're going to tackle that is through whole cut meat alternatives, because there's a lot of burgers up there, a lot of sausages, lots of ground meat. But it's getting to that next level. And so the company really took a very strong R&D approach to this. So it's about breaking down that product. We got all these great food scientists down to every sensory aspect, right? Every bit of the texture, and understanding how do we create the fibers that are going to mimic exactly that chew and that mouth feel, getting the flavor. We just finished working with a partner, not finished. We just started a partnership with Firmenich, the biggest flavor house in the world. They're going to help create a salmon specific flavor. So it's going to be, matching it 1-to-1. And we know that, with some of these products, there's been a lot of companies who've put products out that are not so great, mediocre, not even good. And they're also charging too much for them. Well, people aren't going to pay for a mediocre product. And so if you want, and some of these products have to come out at a bit of a premium, you have to match on taste, on texture, everything. or people aren't going to buy it, especially in a recession. So we knew that going into it right from the beginning. Everything was modeled on being a true match. In this case, sorry, I should have said our first product is the plant-based salmon. But as I'll talk about, our technology is not limited to one product. It's basically more like a scaffolding technique that you can create all different sorts of products depending on how you change the ingredients or you change the way that the technology works. So we're really excited about all the potential that we could do with it. But with the salmon, for example, we really have to make sure we match in every way and including in price. So, Impossible Foods has been able to do a little bit of a premium, but again, they did the same kind of approach, tons of investment in R&D to make sure that that product is a true match. And that's why they're going to be successful. So that's kind of why we were founded in 2020 and we've spent that amount of time in R&D. So it just goes to show you that's really the focus of what we want to be able to do is be that true match. And we want to be a global company. So like I said, we went to Singapore. We want to check out how can we reach a broader market. And obviously the Asian market is going to be huge when we were talking about seafood. So we really wanted to understand, well, what do we need to do now in order to set ourselves up to be able to expand into there, and what kind of products are going to make sense there. Every area, every market is going to be a little bit different. And so we'll have to tailor the products to the market and what makes sense there. And the other, like I said, this technology is really flexible. And so it also could be a B2B strategy too. Like we do want to start with the B2C, but they could be something down the road that other companies are interested in, because it's different than what the main technology that's used in most plant-based products is right now, which is called high moisture extrusion. So we have a different technology, and we think it's going to be much more scalable. And so that will be something that could be of interest to other companies as well.
So suffice to say, the goals for New School Foods is global domination for a kinder food system, essentially, is what we're hearing. So in terms of giving back in charitable organizations, whenever we have these great conversations with folks, we give them the opportunity to answer it maybe from either or both, personal lens or the company lens as well. But can you touch on giving back and charitable organizations? I know in the intro we touched on a lot of organizations that you've been a part of. So maybe dive a little bit more into that, or maybe if New School Foods has anything in the roadmap for a giving back part of their strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll probably speak a little more from the personal side of things, but obviously the company itself is trying to disrupt the meat industry. And I mean, Chris has his own personal choices that he's making with the company, which I definitely think are wonderful. So from a personal side, like I said, it was this connection with, I'd always been involved with animal charities here in Regina, working at the Humane Society, that kind of thing. But it was the effective altruism movement that really helped me kind of shift in terms of, and I do still work with a local cat rescue here, but the thing is, companion animals get a lot of funding. They do, relatively to the number of animals, versus factory farming gets just a tiny percentage. I don't have the number off the top of my head, but it's a small fraction is what goes towards that. And so, and yet it's 50, 70 billion land animals, and then you add fish in there. It's an obscene amount of animals that are harmed by that. So for me, it was really shifting that amount of impact. So both through my volunteer and through my donations. So I started shifting sort of where I wanted to kind of give my money to try to see how I could have the most impact. I have a kind of soft spot for like research and capacity building organizations, just with some of my history. I know a lot of people go for the ones that make more splashy news, but I also know how important it is to kind of build from that ground level, that we need good evidence, and we need to build good teams and collaboration and everything. So I like to support some of these organizations like Funalytics and Animal Charity Evaluators. But I also love things like the Humane League, who have been so successful with their cage-free campaigns, that I want to support things that are just really effective and making a huge difference. That's where I've been kind of spending a lot of my time. And it's one of those things where it's always an evolving question too, is we kind of get in the habit of sort of sticking with the same organizations all the time. But the reality is organizations change, their leadership changes, their focus changes, and it's good to kind of reevaluate that all the time. and just sort of checking in. Are they, having the impact that you want them to have, whether it's working directly or through donations? So trying to stay on top of that in addition to all the other work. So it's like another little side thing too, but try my best all the time.
And that's all we can do is try our best. And you bring up an interesting point that, all of the people that we have these conversations with are already leading in. Like you said, the company itself is disrupting a very horrible, archaic system with new, kinder, compassionate shows. So in and of itself, that's a huge, huge, huge component of giving back. Maybe not in the traditional form of thinking of charity and dollars, but maybe just reframing that from an impact perspective. So that's very interesting. Thanks for sharing. So on your journey, you've mentioned, I think, effective altruism and research multiple times. With that, and or specific to the alternative protein space, are there any books, podcasts, or apps that you have found valuable along your journey to help you improve as a leader and an advocate in the space?
Absolutely. So definitely there's a number of books. Peter Singer's, obviously, Animal Liberation is a sort of a fundamental book throughout the effective altruism community to get people interested in this space and really thinking about animals in a different way. I also really enjoyed How to Create a Vegan World, a Pragmatic Approach by Tobias Leinart. I found that was a really accessible book and just a really great way to think about what we can do to really help this movement. I'll give a little shout out to my colleague, Jeffrey Vare. He runs a podcast called Careers in Alternative Proteins. So he interviews people with all different sorts of roles to kind of help people up and coming in the industry to kind of think about different career options that they might have. So I think that's a good one for anyone sort of interested in getting involved in the space. Obviously, I really want to read, Sandra, your book. It's on my list now. Marketing, I have zero experience, but obviously this is going to be really relevant for our business. So I'm excited to read that and get some more experience in that way. So I have like a very long list, and I'm finding it harder to get to my list now that I'm working full-time in a startup. But so to be honest, I have to balance that with things like listening to like meditation podcasts, because sometimes it's just too much analytical work, and I need to balance that with some just self-care, which obviously you probably know animal justice in there. Kimberly's a lot of work on her, like that whole piece about, people in this industry really need to take care of themselves and put in that work, because it can be tough sometimes, and we can take that home with us. So trying to find that balance too.
Well, it's so great, because that question, book, podcasts, and apps, is not necessarily only intended for growth, growth hacking or business related. It is refreshing to hear answers centered around mental health, physical health, and because that is a huge, it's the foundation of it all. So awesome. Thank you. Now, in terms of inspiration for you personally, what does that mean to you? Where do you source inspiration from? Or maybe even within the team at New School Foods, if there are conversations centered around inspiration, and can you touch on that?
Yeah, for sure. Honestly, things like this, like just what I found out about this group, like just that kind of community building and just helping each other is just great. So thank you for creating these opportunities. I think that I really get inspired hearing about other people and what they've been able to achieve. So that's fantastic. I got like fairly involved with animal justice for a little while, their academy, and really I found that really inspiring too, because they've really got a really great academy community, to give people small tasks that they can do, like things like I never considered going to my local politicians and actually advocating for things or writing letters, and they gave really small or concrete tasks that you felt like you could achieve. You didn't feel like you needed to be an expert or something. It was like a very small thing you could contribute, and so I contributed to one of the bills that we were trying to that didn't go through last year anyway, on I'm gonna forget, like trespassing rules and that kind of thing. And then I ended up engaging my local MP here a few times on trying to get some issues through the election. And it was really inspiring to see what other people were doing, and then to have really concrete things that I felt like I could achieve, and really just move things forward. as much as I could. So another organization, I mean, her work is just amazing. Most people know about Joanne MacArthur's work with the animals media. I mean, it's like every website I go to, you know, it's her work everywhere, and just the impact that they've been able to achieve. What a hard job, just such a difficult and important thing to do. Such a lovely person. So really big fan of what she's been able to really achieve with that widespread. I also was a really big fan of this organization called Encompass. I don't know if people are familiar with that. In the US, they were really focusing on creating a more equitable animal protection movement. Just both like on two different sides. One, that factory farming really disproportionately harms communities through labor exploitation and environmental racism, but then also creating a more equitable movement itself, because there's lots of people, it's not equitable in terms of people of color within the organization. Unfortunately, they had to disband this year, which is really unfortunate. And so I hope to see something kind of come from that space as well, because I'm always trying to learn and bring that more into my life. And so I love to be able to learn from organizations that really have that expertise. On a personal level, I try to support as many alt protein companies as I can. We do buy Beyond Meat burgers fairly frequently. We don't eat a lot of burgers, but just to have, I've got a young kid. I can't make dinner every single night. It's impossible, pun intended. And then I try to support some of the smaller vegan brands as well. We have a little less selection here in Regina than you do in Vancouver and Toronto. So a little bit jealous there, even just like when I go to visit Toronto and I'm like, oh, I just like stock up on things that I can take home, or go to the States and just like lots of fun snacks that we don't have here. So I try to do my support as much as I can that way.
Well, that's again another refreshing answer in terms of sourcing inspiration from, for a lack of better words, people just like you, right? It's not necessarily, inspiration does not need to come from the CEO of $1 billion company or this big brand. It can truly come and is really impactful when inspiration is sourced from people around you, centered around community and doing actionable items instead of these, big things that seem so far out of reach. So thank you. Now, last question for you, Jennifer, is centered around advice, wisdom, tips, anything in and around that sort of lens for people who may or may not be in the alternative protein space yet. Maybe they're thinking of going into it or they're already there. You already kind of touched on a little bit of advice or wisdom in terms of, not being pessimistic and not being discouraged and everything like that. But I'm sure there's some more nuggets, if you would, that you have to share. So please do.
Yeah, for sure. I am relatively new to the industry, so I would just say from my perspective, I think there is lots of opportunity. And I think for people to think a little bit more outside the box, maybe about how they could get involved. It doesn't have to be, I fit. That's what's great about startups is you don't have to fit a specific position. You can go and pitch yourself to them and you can create a role that fits you based on your interest, and they're much more amenable to creating those positions. So really taking that ownership and that being motivated to go out there and find something. And for me, it was about finding a company that I wanted to work for. It wasn't a position. It was, here's a company that I believe in their mission and I want to get behind. And I know that I could. It was less about exactly what I did. That's not true for everyone. Obviously, there's been people who are a little bit more specific expertise. But even then, I think if you're a little bit open about maybe doing a little bit of other work, then I think you can easily find a really good fit. And so I think probably from a founder perspective, it's a little bit tougher time to be starting a company and raising money, but maybe that's more a question for you, Justin. You would know much better, but I know it's a tough time to raise capital at the moment, but not impossible. And from what I understand, the alternative protein industry is a little bit more buffered from the economy. Like these are a lot of very mission driven investors. And so they're willing to kind of ride out some of those little bumps in the economy. So I think it's still totally doable for people wanting to kind of start their own company as well. I think the important thing is to find something that you really care about and what's an important problem to solve. So with the New School Foods, it was really about let's make a true alternative that's scalable. So, I didn't mention this before, but there's lots of 3D printing going on and they can make really realistic looking products. but it's not scalable. So how are you going to make an impact? How are you going to really reduce consumption if you can't be scalable? So I think that's why this company is really exciting, because we have the potential to do that and actually make a difference, because meat consumption is going up. And so, I mean, we really have to do hard work to make a dent here. It's a big challenge, and we face that all the time. Going to Singapore is big, these things hit me in the face sometimes, and just realizing the size of the problem that we're facing. But at the same time, I think, we get passionate people who, and also we're really good at collaborating and working together. We're seeing a lot more like partnerships. And some of those involve working with companies that are selling meat products, but you work together, you leverage them to be able to advance your mission. It can be a great way to go about things. So I think working collaboratively is really important, especially like in a small space like in Canada, instead of trying to compete with each other. Let's like try to get us on the global stage, and really elevate all of us together. I've been seeing like quite a few great partnerships with some of the companies sort of founded by Protein Industries Canada. A lot of companies in Canada working together, using different technologies together. We had a partnership with a precision fermentation company for a bit. So there's lots of potential to really elevate things above and beyond if we kind of get past, well, I just want my product to succeed, right? It's more about like, how can we disrupt this industry and really make a difference?
Really interesting approach in terms of being collaborative instead of competitive, and not cutting off your nose to spite your face, and trying to advance the movement with outside of the box thinking. And we're going to leave the floor open for you here, and it's fine if there's nothing further, but if there is any announcements or anything else that you wanted to touch on from what you did in our conversation, is really demonstrate your open-mindedness, and your ability to take in new information and pivot and adjust. So if there's any announcements or anything further that you want to say to those who are listening on a personal or a company level, the floor is yours.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think I would just say, I'm really proud of where I'm working, and we are open to collaborating too. So if anybody has any interesting ideas related to that, feel free to reach out anytime, because I think that partnerships are really key in this industry, in most industries. So I think that's really important. And yeah, we're really, we're at a stage where things are moving very quickly. But it's good to be looking like far in advance too. So, I'm working on some of the environmental impact, and, we're really early stage, but that's really important to me to be able to demonstrate like what kind of impact are we having on the environment, and sort of setting that up, getting those things in place in order to be able to drive that home, helps for convincing everybody about how important this industry is. So we all need to work together, and I see a lot of shared resources for that kind of stuff, especially for the sustainability side. Lots of companies and organizations helping each other, so that we can really show that. Why would you have everybody kind of starting from scratch and doing it all on their own? It doesn't make sense, right? So if we can leverage and share some of those resources so that we can all work together to show the power and impact of this industry, then I think that's for the better. So I'm always looking for help for things like that, and working together with people coming up with new ideas for research partnerships or whatever it is. That's really exciting, and that's what I love, being at the early stage of this company, because there's just so much potential and so many things that could happen, and I really have no idea where it's going to go, but I'm excited to see where it does go.
Well, there you have it, folks. We have Jennifer St. Onge from New School Foods. She's the operations manager there at a alternative protein technology-based company in Canada. And we're so happy that she was able to carve out some time for everybody who's listening to this episode of Edge Networking Canada. You can find out more online, www.newschoolfoods.co. Just how it sounds, newschoolfoods.co. And everybody else, we'll catch you soon again on another episode of Edge Networking Canada. Take care. Bye for now.